As we wrap up the month of July, hot weather is coming back to the United States. Temperatures up to 100 degrees in many spots, and that'll continue as we begin the month of August. In addition to that, we're looking at storms, flooding rains possibly, and we also have the tropics which are heating up. Let's take a look at everything that you can expect this upcoming week. We'll start by looking at our upper air pattern. This just gives you an idea of how hot the atmosphere is on average, at least the lower half of it. Gives you a good idea of the broad scale. And what stands out here pretty much off the bat is probably this little bubble near New England. That's going to keep the high heat away from some of those areas to begin the week. But what our focus is going to be is actually in the central part of the country. And we'll walk you through. This is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday right here. You can see that darker red color beginning to build. And that's your overall very hot environment in the central U.S. Now, the later half of the week, we'll talk about this in a bit, but I want you to watch the Pacific coast as the ridge really builds out there. And we're talking about some not unusual, but certainly high heat in that part of the country too. We can take a look here at our temperature anomalies at the surface, and this is for Monday, and you can see the central U.S. of all places certainly anomalously warm. We also have this hotter weather, and that's in Ontario and Quebec. That's going to stay in Canada for the most part, but you'll see some of that drift into the northeast as we get a little bit later into the week here. So we'll walk it into Tuesday, and you'll see once again some of the same areas anomalously warm, but notice how this area of anomalously warm temps begins to migrate farther north. That's also a trend we're going to see through the period here as well. Moving into Wednesday, again, there's your temperature anomalies. The central U.S. remains the focal point. We're looking at temps that are going to be 10 to 15 degrees above averages out there. So quite noticeable, especially in summer. 10 to 15 above average can easily mean temperatures in the hundreds out there. And we'll look at those surface temps in a moment. But as we head into Thursday, what you're going to see is just an overall broader picture of that anomalously warm weather. And you're looking at pretty widespread 5 to 10, even 15 degree above average temperatures for most of the U.S. I mean, this is going to be a very broad warming, and the U.S. is certainly going to be very warm across the board towards the end of the week. Here we are for Friday, and like I said before, we were looking at the Pacific coast. Look at those temperatures, especially in the northwest, that are well above average, and we're talking about temps that'll be 10 to even 20 degrees above average highs out there, again, towards the end of the period. This is Friday. And as we look into the weekend, if you got weekend plans coming up, it's going to stay very warm if you're in the northwest here. The rest of the country gets a little bit of a reprieve, but we're still looking at generally above average temperatures through the Midwest, and even portions of New England are going to stay above average on Saturday. Sunday, very similar story. Those temperatures well above average in the northwest. So really the hottest weather migrates from the central U.S. to the northwest. But we can take a look at those surface temperatures too. And here are those actual surface temperatures. This is the NBM. I believe it to be pretty accurate here. This is for Monday, and you're looking at an area where we may see high temperatures up to 100 degrees across places like the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle, even into Kansas. And that's where we saw the highest ridge. Of course, there's going to be plenty other factors, including clearer skies. Of course, you have some wind to help mix things, dry the atmosphere, heat it up, and that part of the country is going to be the hottest. Again, those are your temperatures over 100 beginning on Monday here, and that's still, of course, just the 29th of July, and we're going to be hot heading into August. So we'll walk it forward a little further. Here's your Tuesday. These aren't even highs. These are afternoon temps, but you can tell pretty clearly the best chance to see temps above 100 degrees remains in that same area, the south and central U.S. But remember, that high heat moves farther north as we head through this period of time. While meanwhile, again, you can see the East Coast still sitting in the mostly 70s and 80s. Same deal with the Northwest. They're going to get hot later on too, though. So we'll move it into Wednesday, and as that heat broadens out, you're looking at highs that are climbing into the 80s, even approaching 90 across more of the East Coast. You still have your area of the central U.S. where temperatures are very likely to reach 100 degrees. Once again, it's Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas specifically, but you can also see the heat beginning to build now. Some hints of it in the southwest. Of course, those are temperatures over 100 degrees in the desert regions, but still climbing up to 80 in the Pacific Northwest out there too. Or I should say up to 90 out there. Now we head into Thursday. There's your heat again, very broad now. We're talking about 90s basically from coast to coast, 90s working their way up the East Coast. Wouldn't shock me if we see some of that get into New England, in fact, as far north as that. You have 90s working into southern Canada now too, in the western Dakota, sort of on the on the lee side of the Rockies out there, and you still have your hundreds, which are across the south central U.S. In fact, we could be close to 100 if we can get a strong enough wind, strong enough downsloping off the mountains in the northern central part of the country. But now you have the west coast, which is really getting hot too. Temperatures in the valley in California getting close to 100 degrees, if not breaking 100 degrees. It'll be pushing 100 degrees on the lee side of the mountains as far north as Washington and Oregon, and it'll certainly be in the hundreds, maybe 110s in the southwest, which of course is an area that, as we know, always gets pretty hot. Friday, we stay hot, 90s coast to coast. Once again, though, you can see those hundreds really becoming more prevalent, at least the potential in the Pacific Northwest. That's as far north as Washington, again, on the lee side of those mountains. And we're still talking about 90s up into southern Canada and 100s through the south central portion of the U.S. So we stay very hot into Friday and the weekend, too. Your East Coast still about 90 degrees, a little cooler in New England. We're cooling off in the central U.S. as we get to the weekend, but still very hot, and we're still going to be very, very hot in the Northwest. That's the area where those temperatures are going to be highest, of course. And we finally wrap up the weekend on Sunday with temperatures beginning to drop on the East Coast slowly, but we stay hot across the Northwest and especially the Southwest, too. Still looking at hundreds in the Valley of California and 110s possible in the Southwest U.S., whereas we finally get a break, we'll call it, in Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas. Those are still highs, though, in the mid-90s as this anomalous heat sticks around for what is a pretty good extended period of time. Now, when speaking in the context of heat, it's always important to talk about the dew point, too. So what we can see here, again, is a very humid eastern half of the U.S. here. This is on Monday. So that heat you're seeing across Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas could be a little drier. We'll walk this through the week, and what you'll see is that humidity stays high in the eastern half of the U.S. If you're in the north central U.S., you can see it's comparatively much drier. It's really going to be some of the pretty typical areas. But I'll say the East Coast, even though those temperatures won't be as high, those 90s are going to be pretty sweltering because the humidity. Lucky for much of the Northwest, when we get that downsloping, you get much drier air. And as you can see out here, no surprise, these are more desert regions, but that humidity does stay much, much lower. So you get a dry heat where those highest temperatures are. But the East Coast, it's going to be humid. I mean, we're looking at dew points into the 70s. That's pretty tropical air all the way up the coastline into New England. So get ready if you live out there. Kind of that sticky, more tropical air this week. Now, I wanted to show this too. It's the NWS Experimental Heat Risk Map. When you see those red colors pop up, that's when you're talking about a more pressing to dangerous level of heat. When those purples show up, that's definitely a dangerous level. And here we are Monday. You can see those reds across those areas we were talking about: Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, places that may be near 100 degrees. The lower humidity helps, but it's still near 100 degrees. So, kind of hot. Tuesday, you can see those purple showing up there. That says that heat continues to build. Wednesday, it's the same areas under the gun with those purples and reds. That extends into places like Missouri, Iowa, even into parts of the southeast too, as the heat begins to broaden a bit more as well. Thursday, you see the heat broaden across the country more. You have a general heat risk that's reasonably high across the southeastern third of the U.S., we'll call it, maybe quarter. So that's where you had the highest heat leading into Thursday. But Friday, we begin to see those red colors show up in the Northwest. Areas that are accustomed to heat, same thing in the north central U.S. too, but still it's going to be pushing it when you get to 100 degrees. With the humidity, like we were talking about, that's why the southeast is looking at a pretty significant risk for that heat in the in that area. And then as we head into the weekend, the heat slowly wanes, but still looking at that area again in the north. Western U.S. still have that East Coast. Even up into New England, you're seeing some of those red colors just because the humidity is so high, and that feels like temperature will be well into the 90s, and temperatures maybe in the 90s out there too. But it's more than just heat we have to look at. We have the chance for some precip, of course, and even the chance for some flooding. So let's jump into that and look ahead at this week. So as we take a look at precip, we're going back to our upper air pattern. And again, this is the best tool in your forecast, and you want to start broad and then narrow your way down. So we're looking at what we're seeing in the upper air to give us an idea of what's going to happen at the surface. And what stands out once again, right off the bat, is this bullseye you're seeing out here in New England. What is that? Well, it's an upper low, and what that's going to do is it's going to destabilize the atmosphere a little bit. There's a surface low nearby too. You can actually kind of see the isobars right there, that little bubble. And that's just going to create some clouds and showers in New England to begin the week. Otherwise, what we're going to keep an eye on is this trough in the northwest here. That should be producing some rain to those areas. early on as well. And you're going to see as we move forward in time, that trough begins to advance. Now the ridge begins to eat away at it, but that still has the potential to destabilize some of the air. You also got a trough out here that's coming in from the central U.S., and that's also going to help to produce some rain for those areas, even down to the southeastern U.S. We're looking at the chance for rain as that trough comes through. And again, those troughs, what it is it's cooler air aloft that it just helps to destabilize the atmosphere, brings more energy for storms too. So we got those subtle troughs. Again, even as this ridge builds, here we are looking at Thursday now. You still have this trough right here. You still got another trough right here. So some disturbances that will bring rain and storms throughout the week. But overall, it's going to be a hot air mass, and I'm not looking at any significant systems. If there was something more significant, we'd see more of a cutoff. And then as we get once we get towards the weekend, what you can see here is still this trough, which becomes a lot more apparent. And this is part of the reason the eastern U.S. will cool a bit more. But it's also something that will create basically across the eastern half of the U.S., basically everything out here, it's going to create just sort of a permanent unstable air mass. Things aren't moving too much, but I would expect storms, at least daily storm chances across most of this half of the country, basically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because that trough is going to sit there, and you can see it at times building, and right in between two ridges too. So that's a good setup for some rain out there. Meanwhile, much drier in the western U.S. Could be some storms that pop up off the mountains, but that ridge keeping things much drier farther west. So now we'll move into our precip map. Of course, you're probably used to seeing this, especially if you watch a lot of YouTube. But what we're looking at is basically where our surface systems are, where the chance for some surface rain and storms are. And we'll start here. With Monday. And what you're going to notice is, first of all, this cluster of storms in the central U.S. A lot of this is going to be occurring overnight. Could be a severe weather threat for parts of the central U.S. The threat doesn't look significant, but it is something to monitor, as any severe weather threat is. And many of these days, especially across this region out here, you're going to see some of those clusters of storms on our maps. That's because, like we were talking about, you have those troughs in place, you have a hot surface. It's just going to be a lot of instability, although without significant shear, that severe weather threat will be more limited. We can take a look at the shear here in a minute. Actually, let's look at it right now, just so you can see what I'm talking about. But here's our bulk shear. There'll be enough for some organized convection, but here's your Monday. That's not a lot. It's enough. It's enough when you have the instability, but it's not a ton. So I don't expect any high-end severe weather events, but of course we're looking 5 days out later on, so things can always evolve. Here's your Tuesday. Still plenty of shear there to create some severe storms, some organization. I don't believe we're going to see any high-end events though. Likely a lot of wind threats here, just because it's that time of year. You don't really have as much of that. You don't have any strong surface systems here, so we're not going to see as much of the spin in the atmosphere. With the ridge building, that's going to limit hail potential, but in the north central U.S., you could still get some large hail, but I do believe these are going to be mainly wind threats, especially, like I said, with that ridge there. Wednesday, maybe a little bit convective feedback here, but definitely you still have the potential for some severe storms in the north central U.S. We head into Thursday. That piece of energy moves a little bit farther to the east. Not a lot of a signal here, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have a marginal risk that pops up from any of these areas. Again, you can see that through the central U.S., maybe more so cut off out there with the dry dew points, but into the Great Lakes region could be some isolated severe weather. It's really just following this piece of energy here. Friday, you see that kind of getting to the East Coast. Maybe you get a marginal risk out here. Maybe you get something out here too. But that is really it. Your shear pretty weak. And as we head into the weekend, we'll need to keep an eye on this shortwave coming in from the north, but that's still pretty uncertain. We're still a ways out. So this whole system here may be a good severe weather setup in Canada, but we'll need to watch and see exactly how that evolves. So in case you're curious. But now we'll head back to our precip just to put those oranges you see in context here. Those are the storms. Now here we are Monday, perhaps a decaying storm system, maybe an MCS overnight. We move through Monday, and what really stands out to me is two things. One, again, you can see those storms popping up in the north central U.S., but you also have these storms out here across much of the eastern U.S. What's occurring in New England on Monday is more likely to be regular rain because there's that upper low. It's going to be just kind of cool. Even at the surface, you're going to have a lot of clouds. But in the eastern half of the U.S., you have a lot of these pop-up storms out here. I believe that's going to be pretty general thunderstorm activity, but with trough becoming more apparent in the eastern U.S., what we're going to see, like I said a moment ago, is that just day after day storm chance. One of those where you don't want to cancel outdoor plans, but you want to just think about, there is the chance for some storms to pop up, and that's just going to be the case. It's summertime. You know that in the southeast, especially if you live out there, but that's where you're going to have the best chance for, daily rain. Moving into Tuesday, again, pretty similar situation. We may have more storm activity in the northeast as that upper low begins to weaken, as the surface low begins to weaken too. You may have some more sun, more storm activity. Of course, more chances for storms in the Great Lakes as well. Southeast, pretty general storm chances. Meanwhile, pretty dry out here in the western half of the U.S. Not a ton going on out there. Moving into Wednesday, again, you have your chances for some storms, maybe some organization, especially with the surface low right here. You got your pop-up storms in the eastern U.S., and you're still very dry. You can see that ridge building, especially even at the surface. A lot of high pressure in the western U.S., so you're going to see a lot of sun and just a lot of heat. Not great for wildfires that are ongoing out there, of course. Moving into Thursday, very similar. You still have enough of that shear that you could get some organized storms, perhaps some lines of storms, some convective complexes that occur overnight and kind of die out in the morning. But Great Lakes region is going to be the focal point heading into Thursday for any potential at severe weather. But we'll move that a little bit farther to the east as we head into Friday. Still the Great Lakes region, but more so Mid-Atlantic getting involved here, especially with that surface low there. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a marginal risk in that area. Your western U.S., pretty sunny, pretty hot. Maybe some storms, like I said, that pop up off the higher elevations. Don't expect anything severe, but that might be the only relief that you get from the heat. Saturday, here are your storms in the northeastern U.S. Again, a low chance for severe weather. Your mountains still producing some rain in the western U.S., but otherwise very sunny, very hot. And as we wrap up the weekend, here we are Sunday. This is actually a much clearer U.S. This could be a very sunny day across the country, in fact. And I guess what we need to keep an eye on, this is the Euro. This is just one run, but like I said, the tropics becoming more active. It's hinting at maybe a storm coming up the coastline, but still a lot of variability there. And we'll look at the GFS too, just to give us a broader idea of what's going to happen, so we're not just reliant on one model. But you're going to see a very similar setup. You have those waves of energy passing through the north central U.S. into the Great Lakes region. That's where you're going to have the best chance for severe storms Monday through Wednesday. You have your potential for just pop-up storms every afternoon on the East Coast. And you also have your sunny, hot weather across most of the western U.S., with the exception of some of these mountains where you could have some storms popping up off the higher elevations. We'll walk it into Thursday, Friday. You see that system approach the northeast. That's where you could get some severe weather. Western U.S. stays dry. And then on the weekend, Saturday, it looks like it could be stormy across portions of New England. Otherwise, Sunday, we get much, much clearer. And it should be a nice day. If you have plans for this weekend, Sunday looks like a pretty nice day right now. Notice, though, like I said, we're not buying just the Euro solution on that storm. Remember, I had a pretty nice storm right here. It's not in the GFS here. But we're going to take a look at the tropics because there is something to say about the potential for some activity in that region of the Atlantic. But we're going to move on quickly here to precipitation totals, and we're going to talk about the potential for flash flooding here, as many of these storms, as they're slow moving, can produce a lot of rain. So we'll take a QPF here, and what this is, it just gives you an idea how much rain the model expects will fall. I have a setup on a 24-hour period, so Monday, this is how much rain you expect to see in basically different parts of the country. And wherever you're seeing those purples, that's where you could have an inch of rain over the period, most of that from convection. But what you're seeing is, again, a signature where there could be some pretty good rain in portions of the eastern U.S. where you have those storms that are going to pop up, and you're going to see that value stay pretty high out there. Still the eastern U.S., that's where you have the best chance for any kind of heavy, potentially flooding rains. Any of those storms that move slowly can produce flooding. I mean, you're looking at up to an inch, basically that's what our model's saying, but it can't pick up on those really fine features, so it wouldn't be shocking if some areas, in these storms see as much as double, even triple what you're seeing our model spit out here. Moving into Wednesday, once again, this is where you have some of that convection. That's where your highest QPF would be, but we also have the potential for some heavy rains getting into the northeast by Wednesday. Moving into Thursday, this is a signature to watch out for. We'll look at the GFS too, see if it has that as well. But you can see those brighter purples where you could get a lot of rain in a small amount of time. Friday and Saturday and Sunday, we see the overall precip begin to diminish the precipitable water in the atmosphere begins to diminish later in the period too, which will prevent some of that flood potential. But it's certainly there in the beginning of the period. And the precipitable waters basically tells you how much, rain can be squeezed out of the atmosphere over a certain spot. So now what we're seeing here is, again, Monday on the GFS has that convection producing some heavy rain out there. Also has the heavy rain in the southeastern U.S. Tuesday, similar look. Wednesday, a similar look as well. Remember the Euro for Wednesday, and this is now into Thursday morning, had a pretty significant signature in the north central U.S. from convection. The GFS has it too, for what it's worth. It's also got this little guy here. So these may be areas to keep an eye on as we head through the week if you live in a place like Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, or especially, I think the stronger signal here would be across Minnesota and Wisconsin, where you have that potential for some flooding perhaps later in the week. Moving into Friday, still can see that convection, that potential flood signature on Friday in the Great Lakes, and Saturday as well, where you're going to have that low pressure system sort of spinning and kicking up a lot of the moisture. And with the high precipitable water, that's where you have the best chance for some flooding as well. And then that chance begins to diminish as the PWATs, as we call them, begin to decrease as we get towards the end of the weekend. Another handy tool is the WPC ERO. It's the excessive rainfall outlook, and it basically outlines areas that could see, excessive rainfall and some flash flooding. The idea is that it gives you the risk of flash flooding at a given point, kind of like the Storm Prediction Center convective outlooks work. But here we are. This is Monday, and like we were looking at, across portions of the Appalachian Mountains, you can see we had that slight risk for some of that flooding, and some associated with convection in the north central U.S. out there too. We'll bring it into Tuesday. It's those same areas. We could see that on our weather models out there. That's just your general convection, but slow-moving storms. And, of course, with the high precipitable water, there's a lot of water they can squeeze out of the atmosphere. It's like a sponge that's really filled up. The storm is just a mechanism of wringing it out. Once we get into our Wednesday into Thursday here, this is for that convection overnight we were looking at. Minnesota, Wisconsin, even they're more bullish on Illinois out here too, which is definitely reasonable. You have that slight risk for excessive rainfall. And we'll move it into day 5. And like we were looking at as well, the Great Lakes, even portions of New England where you could get some of those slow-moving storms are under that marginal risk. Same with some of the mountainous areas. Those flood more easily in the south and western U.S. So exactly what we were looking at. Those slow-moving storms over the mountains in the southwest U.S., the Great Lakes region especially, with some perhaps organized convection moving through, and then some general rain in the northeast, some general convection that could produce that localized flooding. And as we move into Saturday, though we don't have a forecast for Friday and Saturday here, I would expect it's, generally speaking, this area that could see excessive rainfall. And you know what? It wouldn't shock me if we do see that for some of those mountains again, just because they flood more easily out there. So those will be areas to watch Friday and Saturday too. Sunday, I'm guessing these chances are going to be much lower per their forecast. That would certainly be my forecast. But if there's anywhere to highlight, it might as well be on Sunday, sort of portions of New England. But overall, flash flooding possibility, though certainly the heat still remains the top story here. And also, tropics becoming more busy. We'll take a look at our National Hurricane Center outlook at some of the stuff that may be going on in the Atlantic. So here's the National Hurricane Center. These are their disturbances, and what we have is one disturbance in the Atlantic right now. You can see it, that yellow X right there. We'll click on it. It's not doing much, but what you're looking at here is basically a collection of thunderstorms. You can see actually each of those little thunderheads there. That's just a sign of a disturbance. There's not much more to say about it. Not much going on there right now. However, if we go to our 7-day outlook, what you can see is the National Hurricane Center expects that disturbance in the next 7 days to basically get more organized. And what we're looking at is a 40% chance, they're saying, of tropical cyclone formation over the next week. It's not huge, but it's not nothing. And especially, that's just the next 7 days. There may be a greater chance for this to develop as it gets a little bit farther eastwards. Now, the thing that makes it more interesting is the region it's in, of course. This area out here is certainly favorable right now with warm sea surface temps, and it's in a spot where you may see a cyclone, possibly track up the coast or even, impact the Gulf. So it's in a spot where you definitely need to keep a very close eye on things that are active in the Atlantic. And if this does continue to develop, it will certainly become a bigger story, and you'll begin to hear a lot more about it, I believe, by the time we get to the end of the week, Thursday, Friday, and especially on the weekend, if this continues to develop, that's when people are going to say more assertively, watch out. But there's still a lot we got to watch in this. It's just a disturbance right now. I'm not doing anything the next 2 days, but the Saharan dust has mostly moved out of the Atlantic here, the North Atlantic, so you have that potential for more development, and certainly conditions are ripe out there for tropical cyclones to form. So we're going to watch that for the southeastern U.S., but even on the East Coast, we're still ways out. I would not be too worried about this right now, but these are just areas that we're just going to watch over the course of this week. So with that, we'll wrap up our forecast for July 29th through August 4th. Hopefully stay cool out there, take care of yourself, remember to stay hydrated, use sunscreen, all that stuff. Sunscreen more so just from the sun, not to stay cool. But take breaks when you need them too. And keep an eye out for any of those storms. Again, not a huge severe weather setup any of these days, but certainly a chance for severe weather each and every day. And the potential for flooding, I want you to keep an eye out for it too. Don't drive through flooded waters or anything dumb like that. So be safe. We're going to keep an eye on the hurricane forecast too. And say goodbye to July, which is kind of sad, because it's objectively the best month of the year. But other than that, we enter August. Summer is still intact, and we'll look forward to a good month, and hopefully weather doesn't get too active, but there's things to watch. So stay vigilant, and we'll be back here again. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want. It's YouTube after all. We'll be here, and we'll have more updates soon.